From the national newsroom of the Canadian Press, I'm Karen Rebo. The Liberal leadership race is set to get its first perceived frontrunner when Mark Carney unveils his campaign this afternoon in Edmonton.
The former Bank of Canada governor is expected to position himself as an outsider, putting some distance between himself and the deeply unpopular government of outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Still, Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives will attempt to tie Carney to the Trudeau government's sinking brand, attacking him over his past support of carbon pricing and his recent work advising the Liberal Party on economics. Former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland and Government House Leader Karina Gould are also expected to enter the race in the coming days. Rob Westgate, The Canadian Press.
The country's premiers emerged from yesterday's Ottawa meeting on Canada-U.S. relations with a pledge to stand together, with one exception. Alberta's Danielle Smith, who attended the meeting remotely while on vacation and didn't take part in the press conference, refused to sign a joint statement concerning possible retaliatory measures should incoming President Donald Trump carry out his threat to slap hefty tariffs on Canadian goods next week. Smith explained on social media that she can't support Ottawa's plan if it is to include a ban or tariffs on Alberta's energy products. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says he respects Smith's concerns, but he believes Trump is trying to divide and conquer and that we need to be united.
That is her choice, but I have a little different theory. I have a different theory that protect your jurisdiction, but country comes first. Canada's a priority.
Canada's energy minister was in Washington, D.C. yesterday, where he said initial retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. would be targeted, unlike the broad levies Donald Trump is threatening to impose on us. Jonathan Wilkinson also suspects the idea of tariffing energy exports to the States would probably be one of the last things in Canada's arsenal. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says a last-minute crisis with Hamas is holding up Israeli approval of a long-awaited agreement to pause the fighting in the Gaza Strip and release dozens of hostages. The statement came soon after U.S. President Joe Biden delivered his farewell address to the nation after earlier touting the role of American diplomacy in negotiating that ceasefire. BC's chief veterinarian is urging owners of small or backyard flocks of birds across the province to stay vigilant about the risk of avian flu and to begin preventive measures. Dr. Teresa Burns says birds' feces were the most heavily contaminated substance, and H5N1 is very good at surviving in cool, wet conditions.
The environment becomes contaminated, and certainly we do wetland surveillance, and we've seen throughout this fall that our wetlands in the Lower Mainland have been very heavily contaminated with the virus.
Burns says the very safest thing was to keep chickens indoors without access to the outside environment where they might encounter the virus shed from wild birds. This is the Canadian Press. In sports, there were just 2 games in the NHL last night. Connor McDavid got 2 goals and an assist as the captain lifted his Edmonton Oilers to a 5-3 win over the Minnesota Wild. Goalie Calvin Pickard made 31 saves for the Oilers' 4th win in a row. In the NBA, RJ Barrett fired in 22 points to lead the Toronto Raptors to an upset 110-97 win over the defending champion Boston Celtics in Toronto. Toronto has hit the halfway post of the season with 6 fewer wins than last year's pace. The Raps are now 10-31. And 2 more Canadians have exited the Australian Open tennis tournament. Denis Shapovalov lost his second-round matchup with Italy's Lorenzo Musetti in straight sets, while Montreal's Gabriel Diallo fell to number 19 seed Karen Khachanov. Leila Fernandez of Laval, Quebec remains in the mix in the women's singles draw. She'll take on third-seeded American Coco Gauff in round 3. From the Canadian Press, I'm Karen Rebo.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. For more of today's top stories, visit thecanadianpressnews.ca.